Corpse Party was a Dojin-soft game originally developed by Team Gris Gris for the computer back in 1996 via RPG Maker software. The PlayStation Portable's remake, originally named Corpse Party Blood-Covered Repeated Fear, features a full-fledged professional cast of voice actors that manages to add a lot to the experience. That experience being one of absolute and utter brain-freezing terror, as the colorful introduction suggested. The plot of this adventure game, if you can call trying to survive either the prospect of slaughter or mental hysteria an adventure, revolves around a group of Japanese high school students and their young teacher being swallowed into another dimension after a certain ritual took place. The lads get separated into several groups inside the multiple otherworldly layers within the walls of a hellish elementary school filled with vengeful spirits of its past victims, giggling child ghosts, and psychotic murderers to our heart's content. The game is divided into 5 chapters with related unlockable extras, and getting through each and every one of them in hope to escape the nightmare is a hardcore test of both wits and mental resilience. I find it especially ironic that, while nowadays AAA self-proclaimed horror games seem to have lost their way, a humbly designed indie product such as this one fully understands what terror, true terror, is all about. Powerful and realistic graphics alone don't guarantee a genuine sense of unnerving investment. On the other hand, a context that is capable of limiting one's ability to perceive the surroundings, thus resulting in a panic-inducing atmosphere that openly trolls with common expectations, is bound to leave a reasonably strong impression in the mind of an unsuspecting player. Modern-day hits like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, or Limbo have once again proven what we already knew all along. Less is better. Or, to be more exact, the less one can see and or understand, the more one's atavism fears will be likely to emerge. Corpse Party proudly belongs to that category. To use an analogy, this game doesn't hold the player's hand and idly guides him towards the ending like a nice parent bringing his kid to a fun ride at the amusement park. Au contraire, this particular tutor happens to be a sadistic psycho-murderer that loves kidnapping little children, locking them in a basement along with the rotting bodies of his previous victims until said kid either goes insane or something comes to kill him in the most gruesome way imaginable. That's the whole game experience in a nutshell. A cursed roller coaster of disturbing, unsettling, even emotional, suspension of disbelief, backed up by a great cast of characters, a skillfully depicted sense of isolation, and, most of all, its fantastic sound department. Even considering the sheer amount of traumatizing imagery that it's bound to haunt one's nightmares for several restless nights, it's ultimately the outstanding use of sound effects that gets the cake in the end. If said cake was made entirely out of body parts, that is, all those creepy steps, random giggles, and gruesome cutting and dismembering noises provide a sense of helpless terror that plain old murder scenes can't possibly reproduce. Ironically, the great emphasis on said noises was prioritized over every other in-game element because the developers, being independent artists, didn't have the budget to fully animate exceptionally gory scenes. Another great demonstration that less is more. The incredibly good voice talents, some of the best Japan has to offer no less, are capable of conveying the sheer level of mind-busting trauma and tear-jerking tragedies each and every one of our protagonists will inevitably go through. Speaking of which, the characters themselves are great and cleverly written, the kind of unfortunate and fundamentally defenseless boys and girls that are easy to emotionally connect with, and that, quite frankly, are painful to see or to hear, dying in some unspeakable manner should they hit a wrong hand route. We have 2 best girlfriends whose friendship will be put to a rather macabre test, a former thug a fan of the occult, and their teacher trying to avoid being cursed by stalking child ghosts. And also we have a good-natured main character that's set on protecting his whiny little sister's life. Among the ones that don't make it, at a psychological level at least, a more specific analysis should be dedicated to a certain character who starts taking pictures of the dead with his cell phone, in a failed attempt to distance himself from the madness. That particular brand of mental breakdown could possibly serve as a rather bold reference to the very real horrors of Abu Ghraib in 2005. Which makes my own perception of this diegesis all the more terrifying and fascinating at the same time. As for the gameplay itself, I would personally compare it with the likes of late 1980s unforgivably hard graphic adventure games such as Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick's legendary opus Maniac Mansion. Particularly, the 4th and 5th chapters almost feel like a homage to that particular Commodore 64's classic. The only difference is that while Maniac Mansion was meant as an ironic, over-the-top take on Hollywood slasher movie stereotypes, Corpse Party is a pure Japanese horror tale with no compromises whatsoever. Meaning that the emphasis is less on the classic pick-up object / solve puzzle side and more on the if you miss this or that, you die horribly side. On that note, it gets drastically more difficult to avoid a wrong end by the time you reach the last episode, with multiple gruesome resolutions awaiting at almost every turn, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. The only nitpicky problem with it is that, unfortunately, the cutscenes are unskippable, meaning that you'll be forced to sit through one every time you die and restart from the last save point, which is fairly frustrating. That aside, Team Gris-Gris's own acid trip of logic-defying bonanza is a perfect, phobia-inducing nightmare that gets everything right, from the suspenseful and gripping narration to the appropriate use of sound and music. And, without a doubt, the most genuine kill fest since Igurashi no Naku Koro ni. It's only after you find yourself in the shoes of a frightened little girl chased around by a grinning maniac, or trapped inside a supposed safe haven with the company of an enraged killing mist, that you'll realize just how unfriendly an interactive context can get. If you're a true fan of the genre, and I don't just mean survival horror games, but horror in general, you need to try this masterpiece out. It's pretty much guaranteed to empty your bowels at least once a playthrough.